So today, TorchPro welcomes on Emily Kaplan. Emily, how are you? Super excited for you to join today and dive into your story.
Danny, I am so flattered that you asked. I love what you guys are doing at TorchPro, so I'm really pumped to chat with you.
Amazing. And so now, before giving you a long intro, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, given you have your hand in so many things at ESPN. So when someone asks you the question, what do you do for a living? I guess, how do you answer that?
So thank you for asking that question instead of what is a typical day like for you, which is my least favorite question because no 2 days are ever the same. But I'm a national hockey reporter for ESPN. I was doing this for the last 4 years, predominantly writing for ESPN.com. Then we got the rights deal this year, which was super exciting. First time NHL's back on ESPN in 17 years. And that opened up a whole new world of opportunities for me. So I appear in game broadcasts. I'm a reporter there. I appear on our studio show, The Point. I like to do player features. I have a podcast with Linda Cohn. I try to break some news, stay on top of things in the league, also write feature stories. So I like to do a little bit of everything and bringing fans closer to the NHL.
There you go, a woman of many talents. And so now, before talking about everything you do at ESPN and diving into that, I want to work our way backwards and start from the beginning. So how did you first breach the space of media and get started, especially in sports? Because I know it's so hard.
Yeah, so I'm a middle child and I have serious middle child complex. It's three girls, and I always thought my dad hated me. So I think inherently to get closer to him, I chose what he did. And growing up, he was a Sunday sports editor of the New York Daily News. He would have really late hours, especially on weekends. And during the week or on Saturday afternoons, the way we would bond is watching New York Rangers games together. So I had a love for hockey. In school, I sucked at math. I sucked at science. Really, the only thing I could do was read and write. So writing came really naturally to me. And I just decided at a very young age that I wanted to be a sports journalist. And I was super singularly focused from that moment on.
Yeah, kudos to you. And I feel like when you know what you want to do at that age, you can kind of set yourself up every next step to get to that. So like I had David Lloyd on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he had graduated. We both went to Colgate. He graduated Colgate and he didn't know exactly he wanted to be in media. So he said he had like 5 different jobs. So it's much easier when you know what you want to do. And so I guess I know you started out on the Boston Globe as an intern. You also were at SI as an intern. Did that intern grind ever feel like too much? Or you had your sights set on media and that's what you wanted to do?
So that's always the piece of advice that I give to college kids is never to discount the post-grad internship, because in my
Mm.
opinion, it's the one time in your life where it's still socially acceptable to be an intern. And you also can work at a place that maybe you're not qualified for and get reps
Yeah,
there. So I went to a tiny liberal arts school too, Penn State. You might have heard of it.
I've
It's
heard
in
of it.
Pennsylvania. Yeah, we have a football team. And when I was there, I worked constantly on the school paper. I was a stringer for the Associated Press, Philly Inquirer. I missed out on a lot of college experiences. Like I never got the full tailgating experience for football games because I was always working them. After college, you mentioned the internships. I started right away when a lot of my friends were hanging at the beach or starting their full-time jobs. But I always had the ultimate goal in mind. And I saw that I was getting reps and getting to interact with a lot of people whose careers I wanted to emulate and be in their position. And that experience was so invaluable that I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, so I kind of want to stay on that theme of like trying to emulate someone else's experience. And so I read, correct me if I'm wrong, one of your mentors was Peter King, right?
It was. And so the way that he became my mentor, another funny story, again, singularly focused since I was a kid. I used to write for my hometown paper. I was like 17 or 16 years old. They would pay me like $5 an article. Every time I tell the story, it's like less and less money. But anyway, Peter King lived in my town in New Jersey, saw my articles in the mail, in the paper, and wrote me a note in the mail. It was like, "Hey kid, keep it up. I never had bylines this young." And so since then, he was my mentor. And at Sports Illustrated, I got to write for his website.
I love that. And I think it's super important, and not just sports media, but like any job is for someone to have a mentor like that. They can go to with anything and not feel judged about it.
So true. And the best thing about Peter is that he really let us shadow him. Like he hired a bunch of young writers because he was at a point in his career where he had accomplished so much and he wanted to open opportunities for others. And we'd go on these training camp trips. Like he's a nut, and we would drive from like Tampa Bay to Nashville. He's like, "You want to take like a pit stop at the Atlanta Braves game for dinner?" And all of us like, "No," and we did it anyway because that's Peter.
For dinner,
Anyway,
hot
but
dogs.
oh, literally, we would like buy a ticket just so we could have a hot dog and a beer, and then we
Yeah.
got back on the road. But we had so much fun, and he got we would go to NFL team facilities, and Peter, being who he is and the stature and the relationships that he has, like he would get one-on-one time with the coach and the GM and the star quarterback, and he would bring us along, and so we could see how he interacted with them, how he cultivated these relationships and maintained the relationships, and that was so invaluable for me.
Yeah, amazing. And so now going through your career journey here, you spent a few years at SI and then you finally made the jump to ESPN, the big bad ESPN, probably the biggest sports player in the space of media. And so I guess what was that feeling like now working for ESPN and now you got to switch over to your passion, which was hockey, as you talked about the Rangers earlier on, you kind of moved on from football, but I guess what was that excitement like?
Yeah, well, so ESPN initially called me about a football job because I was covering
Mm.
football. And in my interview, I must have mentioned hockey a couple times because they called me back a few weeks later and they're like, "We don't have a football job for you, but we meant you like hockey, and our biggest need right now is a national hockey reporter." And so for me, I was like fifth or sixth on the depth chart at SI covering football, and this was an opportunity to be one of two people to cover hockey nationally, like you said, for the biggest sports company in the US. And I just thought that was an opportunity, not to sound too Jersey, that I couldn't refuse. And it just was awesome. It was so cool. It was a little intimidating because I was starting from scratch. Although I love the sport and care about the sport and knowledge about the sport, I didn't know anyone. And so I spent my first summer just making cold calls to like every agent, GM, coach, player, anyone I could like get my hands on their phone number, just introducing myself and just saying like, "Hey, I want to cover this in a really earnest way. I want to get to know you. I want to know what stories are important." And I went from there.
So the grind is even that real for people at ESPN to get those connections is like reaching out to all these different people because at TorchPro, a smaller sports media company, you do all that and it takes a lot of time and effort. But I guess you do the same thing at ESPN.
Yeah. And like for me, don't get me wrong, it's so helpful when I email someone or leave them a voicemail. I'm like, "Hi, I'm Emily Kaplan with ESPN." I don't really have to explain what ESPN
Yeah.
is. Like, I like to think that they know. But what I've learned, especially in hockey, it's such a community, and something that you get value in is equity and just being around a long time and forging those relationships. And when you look at the insiders, the guys that are getting the most information, they've been around forever. So I view it as me coming onto the scene, having to introduce myself, having to prove my worth, having to show everyone that like I care about this, I'll be around for a really long time, and you should invest in me because I'm investing in you and your sport.
100%. And it's a lot of relationships. And I think that takes a lot of time and energy, but it's worth it. And so a question for you I had is what was your biggest obstacle while working your way up into the industry?
It's a good one. Honestly, the first 4 years at ESPN were challenging because, I mean, like the elephant in the room is during that time, it was like a mantra: ESPN doesn't care about hockey.
Yeah.
Because we did it. It was never on Sports Center. We don't show games. We're invested in what we are rights holders of, and those are the things that filter into our ecosystem at ESPN. So, like, I would write a story, and I think it's this awesome story, and I'm like, I worked so hard on this, and this is like groundbreaking in hockey, and I couldn't get any real estate on ESPN.com's homepage. Like, it would be like a story about the seventh string tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals, with due respect to the Bengals. Um, so that was probably my biggest uphill battle. And then again, just fighting those perceptions with people within hockey too, who I think were also jaded a bit and have seen ESPN's divestment in hockey over the years and saying, "No, trust me, like I understand what you think the perception is, but like I really care and I want to do this the right way."
Yeah, I think the NHL on ESPN, this obviously big new contract, is one of the best things that's happened to the NHL. It's bringing them a new spice and energy. It's introducing them to the new audience that ESPN has. So I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. I agree. And like, so we put games on the network, and that's awesome. But what people don't realize is now that we have the rights, we have access to the highlights and the footage. So now
Yep.
on Sports Center, we can show the highlights of it. And then on Around the Horn, another show that I do, like we can make it a talking point. And we're more committed to bringing it into the ecosystem. And now we're starting to talk about hockey players in the same way we talk about football and basketball players. And like the best example I can give you is when Jack Eichel returned to Buffalo. Like, we blew out that game. I had a 6-minute sit down with Jack on Sports Center. Like, do you realize how rare that is for a hockey player? And I almost felt sheepish. Like, I had to apologize to everyone. Like, sorry, we're treating Jack like LeBron. At the same time, it's cool that we're treating Jack like LeBron because, like, we're treating him the way we treat other athletes. And no longer I feel like hockey is bastardized.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And we're close with Jack at Torch Pro. I know him well. That was a really weird situation coming out of Buffalo. So I'm happy he's in Vegas, kind of crushing it right now. I think it's a good fit for him.
Totally. And the fact that like we were committed to helping share his story and his perspective in such a really, like you said, crazy situation, a lot of nuances, I thought was cool because in my opinion, the only way to grow the sport is to get to know these guys,
Yep.
because they're beauties of personalities and they're fun and they're relatable. And hockey's just been conditioned to suppress that personality. And we need to see that blossom and we need to showcase it.
Hey, that was almost like a little promo for TorchPro because that's what we're all about.
Yes, same philosophy, Danny. I love it.
Bringing
But
out the
it's so important.
personalities. Oh, it's
It's
so important.
And like,
Yeah.
how many times in hockey do you hear people say, grow the game, grow the game? Like, it's our everyone's core mission. And in my opinion, the way that the NBA and NFL have grown to where they are today is because the personalities have grown to where they are
Yep.
today. Like, Aaron Rodgers is an ecosystem in himself. Kyrie, James Harden, LeBron, like all of these guys are brands, and that's so big for their sports.
Everyone's a brand. I think it starts with the foundation is content and storytelling, and that will grow fan bases and make fan bases more interested in the sport. Because you look at like the NBA right now, they're promoting at ESPN, they're promoting games when it's the Warriors versus the Bucks. They're saying, "Oh, Steph is playing Giannis tonight." They're not saying the Warriors are playing the Bucks. So hockey's definitely not there yet, but I think every sport is going to kind of progress towards that.
I think so too. And I do think though, like I hear the hockey traditionalist point of view, and I believe that. And that's what makes hockey unique is that a star player only plays a third of the game. It is such a team oriented sport. There's so much sacrifice. I just want to get out of the habit of players literally not using the pronoun I, saying we or you instead. Like it's okay to talk about yourself and it's okay to share your story because that's only going to inspire the next generation and leave the sport in a better place than you found it.
Out of every sport and athlete that we've worked with, football, baseball, basketball, whatever it is, the hockey players are by far the most humble, like 100%.
So humble. And we love it. But
It's
like if
good.
you score a sick goal, like Jack Eichel scores a sick goal, I want to hear about how Jack scored it, right? Like I want to know what's going through his mind. I don't want to be like, yeah, the boys set me up in a nice position and it was a perfect pass and like, yep, you just shoot it in. Like that's not as compelling to me as understanding how someone can get to that elite level and do something spectacular.
100%. And so now I kind of want to work back to your role at ESPN and working in sports. And so specifically as a female, I guess on your way up, did you ever experience any like gender inequality? Because obviously you're a female working in a male sport within the NHL. So number one, you're a very large inspiration to a lot of females out there
Thank
hoping to
you.
aspire to do what you're doing one day. But I guess that being said, like, do you ever have to combat the haters that say you don't know what you're talking about when it comes to hockey?
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of that. There's also a common conception like you only have your job because you're a female, you're a
Yeah.
diversity hire. I would have to say I'm so lucky that I grew up in a time where there were women trailblazers before me,
Yeah.
who were the first in the locker room, who were fighting for access and fighting for equality. So by the time I started interviewing athletes, like they were used to it and they were having women, interview them since they were at a young age. So it wasn't that novel. I think
Yeah.
my biggest challenge now is still being treated like a peer to the guys. Especially I've mentioned relationships are so important, sharing information. Men can go get a drink at a bar with an NHL GM and everyone's like, "Oh, that's fine. He's just doing his job." If I'm sitting at a bar with an NHL GM a certain hour, people assume certain things or
Yeah.
gossip about me. I have rules where I don't text guys after certain hours just to kind of keep some boundaries. I think some players or coaches or GMs are scared to talk to me under the fear that they could say something wrong or I could take it the wrong way and I could try to take them down, which is never my intention. I just
Right.
want to tell the stories of the game. And so those are some of the things I battle of just being viewed as a journalist and an equal
Yep.
instead of a female journalist.
Yep. I never thought about that. That's super interesting. And I think one of my favorite teams and my favorite athletes to watch over the past year or few years, I guess, has been the Team USA women's hockey team. And they've been so incredible. We work with Megan Keller, Casey Bellamy, a few other girls from the team. But sadly, didn't win gold this year. But that sport, I think, is one of the fastest growing sports in the country when it comes to female hockey. And so I love seeing that aspect of it.
I do too. I mean, they're badass athletes and like
Badass.
so just like everything they do and the sacrifice they put in of not having a professional league that pays them a sustainable wage, that they're putting in so much work on their own. But the other thing I've come to appreciate about the female hockey players is they're not afraid to put their personality out there. I feel
No.
like they show it way more than the guys do. And I think they need to lean into that and they have because that's only going to help grow the game in the ways that we talked about hockey in general growing.
Yeah, Megan Keller. She works with us closely. We've done a lot of all access content with her. She's a
Hilarious.
badass and hilarious. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's great.
so fun. I know you mentioned the roster of players that you work with, like her and Casey Bellamy, like I think two all-timers. So
All
if
timers.
anyone's listening and doesn't know who they are, like get to know their personalities and follow, especially Megan's career because she's only ascending. Casey already had a badass career.
She's a superstar. And so, yeah, that's awesome. And so now, what is your favorite part about working at ESPN?
My favorite part is that I get to travel the country and in typical times the world. It's slowed down a bit in the pandemic and talk to interesting people and ask them questions about how they got to where they are. And just having the access to talk to these people and get a glimpse behind the scenes of what makes them tick and how the sausage is made and what goes on to put on an NHL game or to win a Stanley Cup. That is something that like I'll never take for granted. I think it's just so sick.
Yeah. And that's one of my favorite parts about doing this podcast is like learning, right? Learning about people's journeys and applying all the themes and different lessons that everyone has to my own life and my own journey. So yeah, that's relatable for sure. And so now you're on TV quite a bit. What is the biggest misconception about TV? Because as a viewer, we think it's all sunshine and roses and we think it's so great and probably everyone's dream job, right? But I know for a fact that it's a grind and a lot goes into it. So like, what's the biggest misconception about TV?
That's a great one. Sometimes that we have teleprompters for everything. I don't know if I've ever been given a teleprompter. It's all off my tongue or the tip of my head. So if I stumble, that's why. I think the biggest conception talking, my biggest challenge of being on TV, honestly, is self-editing. Like I mentioned, I came in as a writer and sometimes I have so much information and so much nuance and I want to get it all out there. And I get like 20 seconds to do it. It's like, how do you tell a story in 20 seconds when you really want 5 minutes or 10 minutes? So the biggest misconception might be just how hard it is to edit it down. And for me, the biggest challenge too, is I think about it all the time. I turn on TV and I instantly just start forming a perception of the person talking and I form judgments on them and I think I know them or I say something in my mind. And when people do that to me, it's such a, sorry, I'm gonna curse, mind fuck, because it's like, thank you, ESPN family company. Like you don't know who I am. Like you can't form a judgment of just watching me in this like one setting, this one time.
Yeah.
But it's what we all do naturally. And so you have to grow some thick skin and know that whatever people at home are saying isn't necessary. It's important, but it's not the most important thing. It's more so, do you have confidence in yourself? You have confidence what you're saying, and your bosses have confidence in what you're saying.
Right. How often are you like watching the tape of what you did, like maybe on Around the Horn the night before?
Oh, great question. It's so hard because I hate my own voice. I hate watching it back, but kind of like athletes, you need to watch the tape to understand what you did so that you can improve and get better. And the other thing where I find a parallel with athletics is it's all about reps. Like the more reps you get, the more comfortable you are, the more natural it is and the easier it is for you. So getting reps is important. And I do watch back and I'll sometimes watch back specifically games because that's something new to me and just saying, how did I sound? Was that the best way to present the information? Could I have done something better? I look forward to the day when I never have to watch myself on tape again, though.
Hey, practice makes perfect.
Exactly.
But I will say I'm a viewer of Around the Horn. I watch ESPN like for 12 hours straight in a day.
Love that.
You're great. So I love it. Like, so the point system, how does that work? Is that fixed before every show, or is it like actually on the fly, like who's winning?
It's actually whatever Tony's whimsies are that day.
Okay.
And you know, it's funny because like I'll go on the show and I'll call my mom or dad after and they're like, you were robbed, like Tony was totally out to get you. And I'm like, honestly, I like the points I made. I thought it sounded good. Like, I don't care that much. There are some panelists though, and I don't want to call out names, but are super competitive and get super upset at the end of a show if they don't feel like they were justly scored. But for me, I feel like it all evens out in the end. I also win. I have a pretty good winning percentage, so it works out pretty well for me.
I like it. Yeah, there's probably a little chirping going on behind the scenes, like how many wins people have and things like that.
So much chirping. They're so competitive. And it's like not even behind the scenes, like text chains. You should see someone replies all to the email chain. Oh, they never hear the end of it. They don't like the reply alls.
I love to hear it. And so now I have to ask this question. I know that you read the Morning Blitz. Is that right?
I do read the Morning Blitz. I get it every morning.
I love it. And so does that actually help you prep for shows ever? Because we spend a lot of time putting that together, and we like to think that it's for everyone, right? You're casual sports fan, but also for the experts like yourself.
I'm going to give you the biggest endorsement there ever will be for the Morning Blitz.
Let's hear it. Mike's yours.
Yes. When I go on Around the Horn, it's awesome because we cover all sports, but we still know the way it is. Hockey is fourth on the fiddle to a lot of other sports. And I'm so focused on hockey during hockey season that sometimes I'm not totally in tune with what's going on in the NBA season, or maybe I miss an NFL transaction. And when I get that newsletter every morning, I just feel like I am in tune with what the biggest stories are. So even if I don't have to go totally in depth with them, I'm apprised and I know what to go in depth to later. How's
Thank you,
that?
Emily. Yeah, well, that's great. And I like to think that it's genuine and not just an endorsement because I think we keep a nice, quick, and concise product across broad sports.
It's honestly exactly what you need. And like, if I want to go and find out more, I will. But this is just the overview of like, hey, if you want to be a living person in society today and know what's going on in sports and be able to like hold a casual conversation at the water cooler, like you should take 90 seconds of your day just to read this.
100%. Thank you. And so, one last question before diving into some rapid fire. What is your ultimate goal? And you might not know, but what's your ultimate goal in your career with media? Is it to host your own show, be one of the greats in the industry, or maybe move on from media? I guess, do you have a goal in mind right now?
Do you know what's crazy is that like I've exceeded all goals. Like I never thought I'd be in this position. I
Mm.
never thought I'd get this much visibility or opportunity to do work on these really big events. So I'm just riding the wave. Like
Hell
I am
yeah.
just seeing through what I'm working on right now, and I'm gonna do my best at it. And eventually new opportunities will arise and I'll rise to those challenges. But for now, I'm happy.
Embrace the journey. I love it. Rapid fire question segment now. You can answer with one word, one phrase, take as long as you want, as quick as you need. But we'll dive right into it. So,
Love
who is
it.
your favorite athlete growing up as a kid?
Okay, I love Yamir Yager, but this is embarrassing and it's totally going to age me. In high school field hockey, I wore number 14 because Brendan Shanahan was my favorite Ranger at the time.
Okay.
So embarrassing.
Not embarrassing. That works.
It
Um, who,
worked.
who's your favorite athlete to watch in current day sports?
Honestly, it's so cliche, but like watching Connor McDavid is always a treat. Like it's just so cool that we have this unreal generational talent, and like any game you tune in, you know that there's a chance that he's going to do something that you've never seen before. So I think that we need to have a red zone channel for like Edmonton Oilers power plays in general. And just in general, we should have like a red zone channel for his shifts because I would totally subscribe to that.
Just a McDavid Draisaitl highlight reel of hockey.
Yes,
I mean, those two are
yes.
literally insane.
You're stupid.
Yeah.
It's not
So,
fair.
no, it's not. What's your favorite sports moment ever of your life?
That's so challenging.
I know I can't think of one. Mine is when the
Yeah,
Patriots came back 28-3, beat the Falcons in the Super Bowl. I'm a big masshole Boston sports fan,
that's
but
awesome.
Tom Brady's my guy, and that was my favorite moment.
That's awesome. I think my challenge right now is that I grew up a sports fan and that's why I got into it. But I've been stripped by a lot of that passion and fandom by just being around sports. Now I just root for good people and good
Mm,
stories.
mm,
So like some of the cooler things I've ever been able to do is go to Super Bowls, or I was in the bubble in Edmonton when they were playing without a crowd. Like that was just something surreal that I'll never get experience again.
yeah.
Um, I have leaned in though to Chelsea as the football club as the one team
Wow.
that I support. And I was a pandemic thing. I always wanted to get an EPL. So maybe when we became champions of the world, that was pretty cool. I was pretty pumped. I did a lot of flexing after that.
I think they had a big win last night in the Champions League, if I'm not mistaken.
They did. We beat Lille, Captain America. Christian
Captain
Pulisic
America.
scored. Not a big deal.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I might get into some EPL. Who knows?
You
So
should. I can put up a good case for Chelsea. We'll talk offline.
we will. We will. And so, what's your favorite interview you ever done?
Hmm. You know, the first interview I ever did in hockey, that was like a big feature story on a player. It was my first summer doing this. And I went to Vlad Tarasenko's house in St. Louis. And at the time, like I didn't really know much about him. And I think there's still some xenophobia about like, you know, Russian players, you know, just stereotypes about them. And I go to his house and he was super stiff at first,
Mm.
just super quiet, not opening up. And then he mentioned his basement. And I was like, oh, is it a man cave? And he was so offended. He was like, no, you must see it. And he showed me downstairs, and it was pretty much a play area for his kids. And he built this mini rink, and he was just so proud of it. And he's like, wait, you have to see the grill outside. And he comes and shows me the grill. And he's like, this is where I cook. And he was so passionate about showing me cook. Wait, you have to see the kids' bedrooms. And he took me upstairs. And all of a sudden, you could just see him lighting up because he was so proud to be a father and to be a homeowner and to just be like this new son of St. Louis. And he just had this epic quote afterwards. He's like, you know, you came here and you probably thought you were going to see four angry Russians drinking vodka and shooting bears, but like, look at us, we're normal. And so that one always stuck with me because I was so proud of the way that I got to open him to open up and make him just a little more relatable or human to the audience who doesn't get to see him for a lot of different reasons in that way. A lot of them being language barriers. A lot of players whose English is second language don't feel comfortable opening up in that way. So that was a really memorable one for me.
Yeah, that's really unique and I think very cool. And that's the side of things that fans want to see. We don't want to see kind of the stiff player. We want to see that guy who's lightening up a little bit. And so
Exactly.
who do you have winning the Stanley Cup this year?
It's tough. I think before the year I picked Colorado, and I still feel great about them.
Good pick.
Yeah, thank you. I thought so. There's something about Tampa Bay though that I just feel like they're flying so under the radar, and they have so many guys who just know how to amp it up once it gets to playoff time and just turn that switch. That I don't know. I feel like that would be a 6 Stanley Cup final if we got Tampa Bay versus Colorado, and I want to manifest it.
A three-peat's coming. I would say Tampa Bay as well.
Right? And like they're just so good. And honestly, they have plain and simple the best goalie in the game. And goalies can win you games, plain and simple. And Vasilevsky, if you're not paying attention to him, like he's just unreal.
Stud. So last rapid fire question before our final longer question. But what is one word that best describes you?
Evolving.
I like
that?
It. That's a new one. That's a new one.
Thank you. I was going to say unexpected or creative or something else, but I think the thing about me when I realized, I've just turned 30 and, once you hit milestones, you're constantly self-evaluating where am I? And I'm like, I'm fine with where I am, but I'm different than I was 5 years ago. I'm different than I was 10 years ago. And I'm so open-minded to the fact that like the more information and the more experiences I get, I'll continue to evolve and continue to change. And I think that's cool.
Yeah, you have not reached your full potential yet, which is great.
No, I used to joke that I peaked at 22 and like, I really didn't. I really don't want to go back to 22. And if that was my peak, that'd be sad.
I thought my peak was senior year of high school when we won like our football division championship. But
that's awesome. Congrats.
Yeah, thanks. So that's great. So Emily, thank you for your time today. I've loved this, learning more about you. But one final question before you get out of here. Your story is super inspiring to anyone, whether it be females trying to work in media, anyone trying to chase their dream and accomplish what their goals are. But I guess, is there one theme or lesson that you've learned along your journey that you could pass along to the next generation that could help them accomplish their dreams?
It's a great question. I mean, my one mantra always is to be a respectful pest. I think that has gotten me as far as I am today. And if you're a journalist or just in anything, there's two things you can control in life: how hard you work and how you treat other people. And I think about that often. But when I think of my specific journey and how I got to here, a theme I hit on is sometimes questioning myself and having those insecurities and saying, do I belong here? And I have imposter syndrome. And I think you have to have such deep-rooted confidence in yourself, and you can't let the outside noise get to you. Because if you believe in yourself and you work hard and you treat other people well and you're a respectful pest and you do all of the right things, it'll all work out for you in the end. And you realize that you do deserve to be there, and you deserve to be there as much as anyone else.
Boom. That was beautiful. That's a mic drop right there.
Thank you.
Boom. So Emily, again, thank you for your time. This was super fun. Hopefully a lot of lessons that people can learn from, and I hope we can have you back on the show soon.
Thank you, Danny. I hope the biggest lesson that they get from it is that they 100% should subscribe to the Morning Blitz. That was the biggest lesson shared.
Subscribe to the Blitz. Link in bio. Well, thank you, Emily. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Danny.